The information and opinions presented in this podcast are based on research done at a particular point in time. The fields of medicine, surgery, psychology, etc. are constantly evolving as new studies and movements happen. Please take into account the year of any particular episode's publication, and as new information presents itself, we will do our best to release updated episodes on the topics. Listener discretion is advised for references to medical terminology of body parts. Unless otherwise stated, no one speaking on this podcast is a medical or legal professional and cannot provide medical or legal advice. Welcome to the Trans Field Guide. Please join me in welcoming Harper back onto the show. There's a lot of societal opinion against detransitioning. You have, especially the younger trans people that are in like their late teens, early 20s, that are like, I know I'm trans, but they're not really given any time to really explore it because they're being pressured into, okay, you just decided you're trans, you need to start HRT.
Yeah.
You need to immediately start and commit to this right now.
Yeah.
And then you have where if they end up following that pressure, and then if later on they come to the realization that, I jumped the gun on this, and I'm actually non-binary, or, I actually decided to transition for the wrong reasons, or any slew of things, and then they realize, oh, I can't undo any of this.
Yeah.
And so then they have to go through the process of detransitioning, and then they have to face all the social stigma from that.
That is very, because there's not a lot of room for experimentation in your gender. If you are changing your gender, you better only do that one time, because the person I was talking about in particular, in my experience, they at first were like, oh, well, I'm non-binary, but I am trans-feminine, so I should start HRT. And they tried the HRT, and they enjoyed the physical effects of it, but the mental and emotional things were just too much. And then sometimes they felt dysphoric in the other way, and while they were on HRT, they decided, well, maybe I'm a woman. And then now that they've been off HRT for a while, they're like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm non-binary. There's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of pressure from both sides, both from the trans camp and the cis camp. It's just like, there's not very much room and space for exploration, because from the trans camp, you've got, people being like, well, don't make us all look like idiots. If you're trans, then you're trans, and there's nothing you could do about it, and you might as well just transition now, and don't confuse the cis people. And then cis people are like, well, wait a second, you just said your pronouns were this, and now they're this now? I'm confused. I can't keep up with all the... Let me tell you, this person in particular that I was talking about, I remembered to use different pronouns in different situations for them because they were trying on things. And I think absolutely you should be able to experiment with gender, and there is way too much stigma on that. And I think there are a lot of ways to experiment with gender before starting HRT as a stepping stone, but I don't want not transitioning with medical help to be looked at like that. Definitely that can be helpful to people who are wanting to start HRT but aren't sure, so they try on, they try girls' clothes, or, the other gender's clothes, or, they try just different methods of transition that aren't medical to see if that's something that fits them. And then they're like, oh, well, this does fit me. I'm going to go try HRT now. But then there are some people who are just like, nope, this is good. I'm good here.
Well, and especially with the fact that it's like, in some ways I kind of feel like and I'm going to talk specifically in the trans camp, because cis camp has a completely different mindset on this particular point. In the trans community, it's a lot more accepting to transition without surgery than it is to transition without HRT. And it also varies depending on if you're trans-masculine or trans-feminine, because anecdotally speaking, I've seen so many where it's just very acceptable for trans women to not have any bottom surgery because of the fact that HRT will allow them to develop breasts, which makes them, quote, pass more. But that also goes into the whole concept of, in order to truly succeed in being trans, you must be able to blend invisibly with the cis people.
And that's a really old mode of thinking that's becoming on its way out. The more pride we have, the more awareness we have about being trans. Yeah, is the old mode of thinking is like, I remember reading an article once about a person that was talking about that they had been trans, since the 70s. And then they were seeing all these people in a pride parade, and trans people in a pride parade, and they're like, you're not supposed to be proud of that. What are those people doing? But at the same time, like, you're to be part of that parade, you know what I mean? So the old mode of thinking is like, you discover you're trans, you basically like go into hiding and get passable, and then you blend into society. Actually, a long time ago, doctors used to actually withhold HRT to people that they didn't feel would pass, specifically trans feminine people. They're like, don't think you're going to pass as a woman, so I'm not going to give this to you.
Which sucks, because for trans women, it's a lot harder to be able to just naturally pass, because testosterone's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, the way it was explained to me by a doctor was because I went for one of my friend's first HRT appointment because they needed some moral support. The way a doctor explained it to me was, you can always go forward, can't go back, because we all start in the womb as the female sex, and then and we all are the same as children, except for genitalia, until we hit puberty. And then testosterone happens, and, testosterone's a hell of a drug.
I remember when I was in college, I had several friends who were trans. And my mom, when she would meet these people and find out that they were trans, or I would reintroduce these people as, their new names, and, this is so-and-so. I remember the main comment that my mom would have, especially towards my trans feminine friends, would be, oh yeah, I can definitely see how this person would be a woman, because they were already, before any HRT, very feminine in appearance. But it was just that those particular friends were very lucky in the fact that they came out the other side of puberty with very little in terms of masculinization.
The damage that testosterone
did to
them.
And so,
as some of my trans friends would put it.
Yes. And so it was essentially just like, okay, a little bit of laser hair removal, a little bit of HRT, and good. I think that that's where a lot of the misconceptions come from, is a lack of education, both in the trans community and out. Yeah. Because until we go and look for additional information, we only know what we're told. Yeah. And a lot of people's understanding of gender is still very stuck in the 50s and 60s.
Funny aside, I was in the grocery store the other day, and I was in the self-checkout, and they were like side by side, and it was a dad with his two kids getting groceries, and it was a boy and a girl in the grocery cart, and they were like toddlers. And the little girl had like a shopping bag that had princesses on it, and the little boy wanted a shopping bag, and he was like, no, you got a toy, you don't need a shopping bag. And he was like, but Dad, I want the race car bag. And the dad said to the little boy, well, your sister seems to think her bag is a purse. You don't need a purse, do you? And I wanted to turn around and look at this fool and say, he can have a purse if he damn well pleases. But, not my kid, not my place. But there's just so little room, especially for people, not anything against my AFAB folks, but AMAB people, assigned male at birth people who are raised male, have just so very, very little room to experiment with gender. Back to what we were talking about, though, as far as, like, doing things that are not medical, but that do produce changes in your body. There's ways of shaping your body with garments, and in ways that are not specific trans garments, right? Like for cis women as well as trans women, there are padded underwear to give you more hips, There are corsets to make you seem like your body weight is distributed differently. There are even workouts that you can do that can help build muscle. Now, you can't lose fat in one particular area, that is a myth, but you can build muscle in a certain area so it looks more shapely. It looks like, bigger or smaller in a certain area. I know a lot of trans men and trans masculine people tend to do the body shaping in that, they start lifting weights and to get triangle shaped.
It's all the, like, build up the shoulders, chest, and back type of thing for trans masculine. Yeah. And then for trans feminine, it tends to be like yoga and Pilates.
Yeah.
Get that tone butt.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of squats, lots of lunges.
Yeah.
Voice training is a big part, because that's something that I struggled with a lot early transition, is that if I don't take testosterone, my voice is not actually deep. Am I playing a role? Am I pretending whenever I do voice training to make, because this is not my previous cadence or voice. I used to have a much higher pitched voice now, and I mean, some people will say that this sounds feminine, but to me, this is way more masculine than I've ever sounded. Yeah. And that was through work. And when I first started, especially because there was such a pressure on me, because I did experience that personally about starting testosterone, that I wondered, well, is my voice fake because it didn't come that way? You know, because I didn't get it from HRT? And the other thing that kind of sucks about transitioning without HRT is that you don't have that milestone. So most people will put their transiversary on the day that they started hormones. Where does that start for people who don't transition medically? You know, what day is that for them, you know? Something they decide. Yeah. You know, maybe it's the day they change their name, or maybe it's the day that they realized they were trans, or they came out to somebody. But all the same, you almost feel like you're missing that milestone that other trans people have. You do get a little case of FOMO.
Which makes a lot of sense, and I kind of feel like that plays back into the concept of the misconception that there is one way to transition. And that also kind of plays into the whole concept of trans without dysphoria, which is a whole nother bag of chips. It's kind of the same thing for trans people without dysphoria that decide not to do any medical transitioning. Because of the fact that there's so much social pressure in, like, there is one way to transition, which is completely false. But the social pressure is still there within our own community. Exactly.
I used to go to support group meetings, and we would start with celebrations, and every time somebody would be like, oh, I started T today, or it's been 5 months on estrogen for me. I felt like, not to say that, like, I needed the attention, I needed the support more than anything, but I felt like way more attention was put on those people, and it was more of a feat than anything I was doing to transition. And that may be me being petty, but I feel like social parts of transition should be highlighted just as much as the medical.
Which I can definitely agree with, especially because a lot of the social transitioning, even if you have every intention on getting on HRT, having XYZ surgery, whatever, there's still a certain amount of social transitioning that is inevitably going to happen before you get to that point. You know, maybe you're not out to everybody in your life, but you have to come out to yourself, which is a feat in and of itself. And, you know, you have to have those different steps of, I'm starting to play around with my gender. I'm starting to wear clothes that match my true gender. And all of those other milestones. Those are still milestones.
I've chosen pronouns that fit me best.
But like you said, we don't stand up and tell a whole room full of people, hey, I wore a dress out today.
Yeah, to the same level of support that you would saying, like, I started estrogen today, or I feel like people in our community treat that as, like, the first day of the rest of your life kind of thing. But it's a milestone, just like any other.
In some ways, I can see why it could be seen as a little bit more of a feat to the average layman, because of the fact that we have so much gatekeeping in as far as medical transitioning goes. We have far less gatekeeping for social transitioning. So to stand official gatekeeping. So to stand up in front of the crowd and say, I have started hormone replacement therapy, it's considered to be this huge success. Like, you've defeated the man. Yeah, like, you've defeated this boss level. You've leveled up now. Yeah. But again, that completely takes away the weight of everything that led up to that moment for them. Like this episode? Tell someone about it. Resources referenced in this episode can be found in the show notes at transfieldguide.com. Stay safe, and remember that I'm proud of you.